name is John Miner. My family's been here on this continent since the times of the Pilgrims. We've been here for a while. I moved to the city of Pawtucket in 2012 and was living my life quietly without much interaction until one day my peace was disturbed. My life has been forever changed since that day. I was minding my own business when intruders came upon my property to trespass and do vandalism. Consequently, I'm pursuing a remedy in the courts for the damage done to me on that day. It has been over 16 months now, and I'm still waiting for restitution. The reason why I'm standing here today is because I'm sick of waiting, and I'm sick of watching other people being treated the same way by this administration. Last night I went to a meeting in North Kingstown, Rhode Island, with a group of concerned people who were talking about things that are happening in our capital. One of the topics was how Bloomberg and his associates are trying to influence the General Assembly to destroy some of the basic rights of the people in this state. We have seen in other states how our rights have already been destroyed, and that disease is spreading in our direction. They have paid lobbyists trying to change the laws in an attempt to disarm men and women for simple misdemeanors. Some of those bills are co-sponsored by your municipal court judge, Senator Nesselbush. About a year ago, I saw a video of your new governor speaking to a crowd of teachers at a union meeting. Gina wasn't yet elected. She was still on the campaign trail, and she promised those teachers that she would get rid of the guns. This was a broad statement equating to her promise to disarm the people of this state. Around that same time, I was standing in a line at a store where there was the usual magazine racks at the checkout counters. One of the magazines was a Field and Stream, a popular magazine for hunters and fishermen. When I was a child, I loved to look at my dad's copy when it came in the mail. On this particular day, the cover of the edition showed a picture of a man in hunting attire holding a shotgun and looking up at a pheasant flying by his field of view. There was a child about 7 or 8 years old standing in front of me in line with his dad. The boy tugged on his father's shirt sleeve and pointed to the magazine and said, "That's violent." I almost vomited. Then I wanted to scream, but I held my tongue because even a child is entitled to his opinion. But I wondered where he got that opinion from. So what are they teaching the kids these days? They certainly aren't teaching them about our Constitution or our natural God-given rights. In fact, we know now that the school administration condones lying to the kids and literally depriving them of any kind of real education. This is where I would segue into a tirade on Common Core, but I'll save that for another day. The reason why I'm documenting these things for the public record is because I envision a day when our grandchildren are sitting around a holographic image of a campfire, wondering what happened to the good old days when people actually went camping, toasted marshmallows, and told scary stories around open fire. They will ask why their grandparents did nothing to stop Agenda 21 or the UN takeover of America or communism in general. I hope that day never arrives. In the last session of this body, we ended with a moment of silence in remembrance of the Armenian genocide. Not much was said about it, but I was curious, so when I got home, I looked it up. The first thing they did was take the rifles away from the Armenian men who were enlisted in the army. They did this so that the men would not be able to defend their families when Stage 2 kicked in. The next step toward genocide was to send people out to slave camps. The final part of the plan was to round up and slaughter anyone with Armenian blood in their veins. Many of them were chopped up with swords. At one point, they actually herded a whole village of women and children into a corral and lit them on fire. As many as 5,000 women and children were burnt alive in one village alone. Some of the others were loaded onto barges and floated out into the middle of the sea and dumped overboard and allowed to drown. In other towns, they were killed and just thrown into the rivers so that the remains would float away. Witnesses said at one point the Euphrates River had so many bodies in it that it actually changed directions because of the dam made out of human flesh. When you turn to pledge allegiance to that flag over there, I want you to really think about what it stands for. Think about the Republic and realize that it is almost dead. This is no longer the America that I was born in. For the first 50 years of my life, I resisted getting involved with politics. I never really participated in my government, but then one day someone pointed out to me a quote by the old Greek philosopher, commonly known as Plato. Sometime around 380 BC, he wrote a book called The Republic. In that book, there's a famous paragraph that says, "And for this reason, I said, money and honor have no attraction for them. Good men do not wish to be openly demanding payment for governing, and so to get the name of hirelings, nor by secretly helping themselves out of the public revenues to get the name of thieves. And not being ambitious, they do not care about honor. Wherefore necessity must be laid upon them, and they must be induced to serve from the fear of punishment." And this, as I imagine, is the reason why the forwardness to take office instead of waiting to be compelled has been deemed dishonorable. Now, the worst part of the punishment is that he who refuses to rule is liable to be ruled by one who is worse than himself. And the fear of this, as I conceive, induces the good to take office, not because they would, but because they cannot help, not under the idea that they are going to have any benefit or enjoyment themselves, but as a necessity, because they are not able to commit the task of ruling to anyone who is better than themselves or indeed as good. For this reason, for there is reason to think that if a city were composed entirely of good men, then to avoid office would be as much an object of contention as to obtain office is at present. Then we should have plain proof that the true ruler is not meant by nature to regard his own interest, but that of his subjects. And everyone who knew this would choose rather to receive a benefit from another than to have the trouble of conferring one. What this means in a nutshell is that if we don't step up to the plate, someone else will, and their intentions may not be for the good of the people, but rather for their own personal gain. So it was on December morning in 2013 I discovered that agents of this city had come to take personal gain from the land upon which I had tenancy. These trespassers were sent by the municipal court with an order to clear the land that I had been working along with friends to sculpt into a garden. They didn't ask for permission to do any work on the property because if they had, I would have told them to move along. I'd already hired a friend to help. So when I discovered that they were working on the land without my consent, I immediately called the landlord and inquired why he had hired landscapers. He said that he hadn't hired anyone. It's a long story, so I'll spare you the details. It's all a matter of public record at this time if you wish to research it. But let's suffice it to say that this was the beginning of my adventure in legal land. On that December morning, we had the unfortunate opportunity to speak with several Pawtucket police officers, none of which seemed to be educated in the laws of this land. I couldn't believe that the men who are challenged with enforcing the law in our city simply didn't know the law. They were questioned many times on various subjects, and none of them knew what the law had to say. They just didn't even know the law. Since that day, and after a lot of research, I have filed a lawsuit in the federal district court so that I can find a remedy. That pursuit is ongoing, so I won't talk about it anymore. But this experience reminded me of a bill for the more general diffusion of knowledge, written by Thomas Jefferson in 1779. In section 1 it says, "Whereas it appeareth that however certain forms of government are better calculated than others to protect individuals in the free exercise of their natural rights, and are at the same time themselves better guarded against degeneracy, yet experience has shown that even under the best forms, those entrusted with power have in time and by slow operations perverted it into tyranny. And it is believed that the most effectual means of preventing this would be to illuminate, as far as practicable, the minds of the people at large, and more especially to give them knowledge of those facts which history exhibiteth, that possessed thereby of the experience of other ages and countries, they may be enabled to know ambition under all its shapes, and prompt to exert their natural powers to defeat its purposes. And whereas it is generally true that the people will be happiest whose laws are best and are best administered, and that laws will be wisely formed and honestly administered in proportion to those who form and administer them are wise and honest. When it becomes expedient for promoting the public happiness, that those those persons whom nature has endowed with genius and virtue should be rendered by a liberal education worthy to receive and able to guard the sacred deposit of the rights and liberties of their fellow citizens, and that they should be called to that charge without regard to wealth, birth, or other accidental condition or circumstance, but the indigence of the greater number disabling them from so educating at their own expense those of their children whom nature hath fitly formed and disposed to become useful instruments for the public. It is better that they should be sought for and educated at the common expense of all, that the happiness of all should not be confided to the weak or wicked. Now let's get to the point. There is a resolution before this body that calls for a special response unit within the police department. In the wording of that document, we find references to armed citizens being labeled as criminals. I think it is important here to examine the laws of this state and this nation to see exactly what is wrong with those statements. First, let's look at the Constitution for the state of Rhode Island, Providence Plantations, Article 1, Section 22, where it says, right to bear arms. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now let's look at the U.S. Constitution. The Second Amendment says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Isn't it interesting that Rhode Island's Constitution leaves out the part about the militia? I wonder why they did that. Maybe because the militia was an accepted part of the free society within the state. Maybe because every able-bodied man was expected to participate in the execution of the laws of the state. The Roman statesman Marcus Tullius Cicero, when speaking on the nature of criminality, once said, the enemy is within the gates. It is within our own luxury, our own folly, our own criminality that we have to contend. Now let's look at a couple of Rhode Island general laws that are frequently ignored and overlooked by police. But first I want to mention that while I was preparing this paper, I kept asking myself the question, what would Jesus do? The answer kept popping into my head is from a line in the Lord's Prayer. You might remember that part about, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Why would Jesus be so concerned about trespass? Title 11, Criminal Offenses, Chapter 44, Trespass and Vandalism, Section 26, Willful Trespass, remaining on land after warning, exempts the tenants wholly over. Every person who willfully trespasses or having no legitimate purpose for his or her presence remains upon the land of another or upon the premises or curtilage of the domicile of any person legally entitled to the possession of that domicile, after having been forbidden to do so by the owner of the land or the owner's duly authorized agent or a person legally entitled to the possession of the premises, shall be punished by a fine not exceeding $1,000 or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year or both.
John, just want to let you know, we've got a 30-minute window in the rules for public input, and I got another person. So it's been about 12, 13 minutes. So you got a couple more minutes because I don't know how long the other person's going to be. We got to keep it within the window.
All right, I'll try to paraphrase the rest of this. Basically, what the problem is that we have laws, and the laws are being ignored. Police are not following the laws. The police don't even know the laws. We have people being killed in the streets. I had an opportunity to speak with the chief of police in this city, and he said, "No, that's not going to happen here." At the time, I was opposed to his viewpoint because I thought, well, it's happening everywhere else in the United States of America. Why wouldn't it happen here? But maybe he's right. Maybe we really don't need any kind of special unit. There's a lot here. I read an article on the internet about a 7-year-old girl in Michigan who was gunned down in her bedroom by a police officer who had broken into her home, mistook her for a criminal. What were they thinking? All right, so anyways, what it amounts to is I think that before we spend money recreating or reinstating the special response unit within the city, we should first make sure that the entire police department is properly educated on the laws that they're supposed to be enforcing before another innocent citizen gets killed. Maybe the money would be better spent on lapel cams. In closing, I just want to mention one last document. It's a long, so obviously I'm not going to read it, but this was one of the Anti-Federalist papers. It appeared in the Massachusetts Gazette in 1787. The title was "Rhode Island is Right." I'm just going to read the last sentence. It says, "We should all impress with great care this truth on our minds, that it is very easy to change a free government into an arbitrary one, but that it is very difficult to convey or to convert tyranny into freedom." You can read the rest of it for homework. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Bill Greenwood.
One issue is the street paving. My street looks beautiful today. Nice street. The thing is, I'll go back to last week. Suddenly there was a hammering on my side door. I said, "What, is there a fire or something?" I mean, hammering, pounding. Doorbell rang. Went down there. They said, "We're going to work on the streets." Okay, well, all right. We'll see that my tenant gets her car in the driveway. So, I guess in a matter of minutes, she came home. She was frightened. She said, "Bill, I'm okay." I said, "Okay, hold on, Bill." I said, "I'll move my car, you move your car in, we'll get it straightened out." And we did that. She got out of her car, and she was just standing there. I could see she was frightened. She's an elderly lady. She's she walks with a cane and so forth. She was just standing there. So later on, I talked to her, and she says, "Bill, when I'm rapping on the door," she said, "scared the hell out of me." She said, "I'm just walking across my kitchen with some cereal. I dropped everything on the floor." She says, "I wonder I didn't slip and fall." I said, "Bill, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. They're taking care of the streets." I said, "I mentioned it to DPW, Department of Public Works." And it went on from there. Now, I talk with Dell from time to time. I said, "I will try and keep you aware of what I know, Dell, so you can make your appointments or whatever." Because she said, "I might sleep during the night, I might sleep during the day. I don't have a routine schedule." I said, "Okay, I understand that." So, yesterday I see a flyer posted to the telephone pole. It says, it was going to be, let's see here, Thursday, 6 to 6. Okay, no parking, Thursday, 6 to 6. So I told her about it. She said, "Okay." And today, they showed up, and here again, they're pounding at the door. I think it was supposed to be Thursday, but suddenly they made it today. Well, I talked to the police officer that was kind of getting everybody off the street, and he said, "Well, it was a mistake." Mistake. Well, it interferes with people's lives. A lot of these people, they're not young kids. They're older people. They have a little understanding, We're paying the bill, millions of dollars for having us all this paving done and so forth. So I think they could handle it a little differently. Our street is done. Not to worry. Maybe someone else's street, They give them 24-hour, 36-hour notice. It would be nice. I think it would be nice. I think it would be helpful. Because I'm sure I'm not the only person with an elder lieutenant. Not to say I'm a young man. I'm not a young man by any means. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I think they could handle this paving thing a little differently. A little more understanding. issue I bring up is the issue of Middle Spring Cemetery. I was down at the Department of Public Works, I don't know, was it last week? I lose track of the date sometime. And I told them, you know, several years ago, we brought something to your attention. And it was trash building up down where the building abuts the cemetery near the tracks. That's the best way I can describe it. I was down there recently, and the same thing is happening again. The trash is building up again in that little gully. I call it a little gully. Okay, you know, it's pretty much, you know, we'll get to it. You know, no definite answer, but okay, we hear you. So, been in the cemetery since then, and Ken Postle made me aware of something. He said, you know something, Bill? They're building a little campfire here. Come over here, I'll show you. And he showed me the monuments. One of the monuments that had broken up. She had time to try and put it together and make it, you know, make it right. But they were making a little campfire. I said, that's so disrespectful. Okay, that's one thing. We wandered along a little further in the cemetery, and here's these rags and bottles of water and so forth. And Ken was the one who gathered them up. Okay, let that go. Another day we're in there, and sure enough, they were camping out. It looked like people were camping out. There were soda bottles, beer cans, towels, pants, duffel bags, backpacks, you name it. It was scattered all in this one area. Trash. It was trash. So again, I brought it to DPW. I said, the trash. I said, I showed you, this is exactly where it is. You go down the main street, you go over here, and this is where you can't miss it. You know, it's trash. And we're going to take care of it. That was last week, I guess. Well, went through there today, and of course, it's still as it was. Nothing's been touched. The thing that really bothered me was when, I don't know if Ken was moving some of the trash or I was looking at it or something, but we noticed the syringes. Ken brought it to my attention. He said, Bill, watch out, there's syringes there. And one thing, there was a package of syringes. Believe it or not, there was a package of syringes. So what is happening with Middle Spring Cemetery? Again, I brought it to DPW's attention. Okay. And when I saw the syringes, I brought it to the police department. Went down there. I said, hey, this is what I've seen down here, you know. Well, the officer was very nice. Female officer. She was very nice, you know, talked to me. Okay, you know, I hear you. I listen to you and so forth. You know, as you folks, I'm sure, remember, maybe 25 years ago, when that tragedy took place in Middle Spring Cemetery. I'm sure you all remember. I don't think I have to repeat it. It was a tragedy. Over the last 5 years, with the help of a few volunteers, I think we've made a lot of progress bringing respect back to Middle Spring Cemetery. And now what we see is it being trashed, in my opinion, it's being trashed again. It's not right. Now, whether it needs more police surveillance, whether it needs, I don't know what it needs. But you can't have that. You can't have people wandering in there and suddenly they come upon all this trash. So, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it responded to. I'd like to see the Department of Public Works respond to it, or the police department respond to it, however they do it. You know, I can see anybody that's down on their luck. Because it happened to me when I was a kid. So, place to stay, and you took a safe place. But the thing is, when I did this with another gentleman, when we left, we took everything with us. We went there, maybe we slept overnight there, this particular place, whether it was New York, whether it was California, wherever it was. We left it clean. What we put there, we took with us. I mean, it was as if we weren't there. So I think if somebody's down in Buck and they had a sleeping bag and they wanted to roll out in the Middle Spring Cemetery or Old Grove Cemetery, fine. Pick up your stuff and leave in the morning. No, don't trash it. Don't leave your beer cans, your bottles, your soda bottles, your syringes. Don't leave all that crap hanging around. She's not right. Making any sense? I hope it makes some sense. There's one other issue, but I'm going to let the neighborhood take care of it. I'm going to let that handle it. It's another issue, it's a minor one. Let the neighborhood handle it. And if they don't handle it, well, so be it. I thank you for listening.